What is it?
It's your father's lightsaber. This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight. Not as clumsy or random as a blaster. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
The Force is with you, young Skywalker. But you are not a Jedi yet.
The Graflex, possibly the most well-recognized lightsaber in the Star Wars franchise that became the most iconic weapon in cinema history. Everyone knows what a lightsaber is, so for us fans it was only natural to want to own one eventually. Back in 1977, the idea and concept of a lightsaber was considered ridiculous by everyone. Basically composed of a 1930s camera flash handle, a calculator, and 6 black plastic T-grips, nobody, not even George Lucas himself, would expect that the laser sword concept would become so popular one day. When I was a kid and saw and heard a lightsaber for the first time, I made it my life's goal to get my own someday. Today, thanks to a variety of dedicated fans in the lightsaber community, owning a lightsaber that is as accurate as the ones in film is now a reality. Thanks to the sequel trilogy, the iconic Graflex that was thought to be lost in Cloud City by Luke and Vader's duel has been reintroduced to the old fans and new ones alike. Since 2015, collectors went on a Graflex frenzy that demanded the mass production of affordable, high-quality replicas, since the vintage Graflex became incredibly pricey overnight. Thanks to a number of vendors out there and manufacturers, Saber fans now have the option of where they can buy their Graflex. I will be building my own Graflex with the kit that I purchased from Corban, and I will be going over a particular set of steps, since there are plethora of ways on how to approach a build. Join me, and we will embark on a journey where we will end up building our very own functional Graflex. If you're not confident in your building skills or that you can't do it, then keep tabs on the series and hopefully I can inspire you to build your own lightsaber one day. So without further ado, let's get right into this. Hello everyone, welcome to my official video series of how to build a Graflex, where I go over the build step by step to put together all necessary components in order to complete a fully functioning lightsaber. This build will follow a specific set of steps, as there are various ways on how to build a Graflex. In the first part of this video series, I will go over all necessary tools, materials and components needed to make this build a possibility, and also to help you encourage yourself to make one on your own someday. If you are a rookie when it comes to soldering, for example, don't worry, I am too, and I guarantee that with just enough practice and sheer will, you can do it yourself. Let us get into the build and let us go over every single material needed for this build. So, if you have a notepad or you're on your computer or anything, take down some notes. There will be a specific set of steps that you're going to need to go over. Okay, first off, let us go over the Graflex. I'm going to be going over the kit, the electronics, the 3D printed plastics, the battery, and the rest of the tools and materials for this build. First off, we have the Graflex kit itself. Let us open it. Oops. The Graflex hilt, and the kit comes with a set of bags. The ones that you're going to need for A New Hope, the ones that you're going to be needing for The Empire Strikes Back, The Force Awakens, or The Last Jedi. Depends on which one you choose, it's a matter of personal preference. And of course, the lightsaber hilt itself. Comes in a bubble bag, and well, that's it. Next on your list is the electronics needed for your lightsaber to function. Now, for the majority of things, I got all of my electronics from the custom saber shop. I have my soundboard module over here, which is the Nano Biscotti version 4, which I also took the liberty of downloading the necessary manual. I don't know if you can see it, but I downloaded and printed the entire Nano Biscotti version 4 manual needed for this build. This is basically the entire brain of your lightsaber, as it will register swings, clashes, and, well, the flash and clash effect, and generally it will give the lightsaber its humming sound. The sounds are stored in your SD card, which are interchangeable through saberfont.com. However, this memory card is preloaded with dark meat and light meat sounds. If you feel the need to change your sound effects, like I said, go to soundfont.com. There is a plethora of sound fonts and effects for your lightsaber. Next is the recharge port. The recharge port is essentially where the lightsaber is going to be recharged, of course, and it will help charge the battery when it goes low. Without a recharge port, your lightsaber would basically die off. Next is the battery. I specified that I couldn't buy this internationally from the custom saber shop because I live in Europe. Thankfully, they were able to redirect me to one of their close partners, JQ Sabers, in the United Kingdom. Due to federal laws and regulations, I could not purchase it from the United States. But from the United Kingdom, since I already live in Greece, which was inside Europe, I had no problem whatsoever. Next, you're going to need a speaker. There is a variety of speakers out there in the market, but I decided to go with the premium 28mm speaker because this has a much slimmer profile and I'm very happy with the sound it makes. My Saberforge Redeemer has the exact same speaker and it is very, very loud. So I'm happy with it and I'm going to be using it. Since it's going to be in the chamber of the custom 3D printed chassis, it's going to resonate very nicely and the sound flow is going to be even. That's what I'm hoping for, at least. So let's see how that works out. Also, it is slim, like I said before, and it will not butt against my crystal in the crystal chamber. As you will see, I will explain that at a later time. Next, you're going to be needing your lighting or illumination. Now, the entire lighting components are 4 pieces. This, like I demonstrated in an earlier video when I got my part from the custom saber shop, this is my LED module. The LED module has 3 main LED diodes. And if my camera will focus, I will be able to show them off. The one I'm tapping now is the white color die, which I'm going to be using for the flash on clash effect. The one over here at the bottom is the royal blue, if I remember correctly, because it was marked under the sync pad. And the one on the top here is going to be the blue. So I want to see how those dies pan out for me. Next, you have your optic lens, which is going to help retract or refract the light, actually refract it. It's going to help the light to disperse even better so that you can have a better effect of illumination. It is essential to the build and you cannot have an LED module without this. You're going to need to mount your LED onto the heatsink itself. This is an essential part of the lightsaber as well. This is copper, and since you're going to be putting your LED onto the copper, you need to keep note that you're going to need something to insulate it when it comes to temperature, because it's going to ruin your LED star eventually. There are 2 ways of preventing that from happening. One of them is purchasing the thermal star pad from the custom saber shop, which is essentially a white piece of paper that has, well, the outlines of your LED, LED star, and basically you just cut that out and you just stick it between the LED and the heatsink, and it's supposed to insulate your lightsaber from heat, and well, it does a good job from keeping your LED diodes safe and doesn't overheat and burn it out.
However, I do not have the thermal star pad. I decided to go with some thermal paste that I got off the internet. I got this from a seller on eBay. Essentially what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be dabbing just a bit of paste on the star pad under each specific die, and when I'm done with that, I'm going to be pressing it against my LED heatsink. Then is the LED heatsink shroud, which is threaded on the inside, and you basically get the concept. With the optic on top, you're going to basically thread the whole thing together, as I've demonstrated earlier. I'm not going to do it right now. Basically, it will hold everything together. And when we solder the LED star, the wires are going to flow from the back and we will have our LED module ready. But that's for another time. So that's that with the electronics, and let's move on to the next materials needed for this build. Next, moving on, we're going to be needing something to house all of the electronics that we mentioned earlier. There are a variety of ways of doing that, but essentially you're going to be needing something to solidify and make your electronics stay in place firmly. Otherwise, when you swing your lightsaber, the electronics are going to be flowing and it could damage some wiring and your modules in general. So for that, there are two options. Basically, you can get the custom plastic discs and rings and threaded rods from the custom saber shop. That was initially how the chassis used to be built. Basically, the discs would have specific holes for specific soundboards and specific modules inside, and that's where people would hold their electronics and stuff. But then someone of the name Rick Rio came with the idea of 3D printed chassis for specific lightsaber hilts and builds. It was an ingenious design from him, and he took the time to basically design these and print them himself. And today in the saber community, he is a necessity when it comes to building lightsabers. However, you can go with the chassis discs from the custom saber shop. I'm not going to go with that, but that is totally up to you. If you're going to follow this build like I'm going to do so, this is the way I'm going to go. Rick Rio from 3D Goth Designs has designed a number of chassis options, ranging from the Padawan, which is the most simplest chassis, which is kind of like this. It holds all of the electronics and your battery and everything into one small 3D printed plastic that butts up against the end section of the Graflex, and that's it. No crystal reveal. It is cheap. It is an economical way if you want to go that way. He also has a variety of chassis for an according budget. If you want to go with the latest Master and Mentor chassis, which also have metal parts, you can go with that too. However, since I am on a budget, but I want to make something affordable and both stylish at the same time, I decided to go with a medium budget purchase. The Knight 3D printed plastic chassis is one of the most popular chassis you can get out there, because it is a two-piece design and it also has a crystal reveal feature. This is essentially going to be holding the crystal and the soundboard over here, as well as the recharge port underneath. This section is going to be faced against the pommel of a lightsaber, which will enable you to charge your lightsaber and also gain easy access to your SD card that will be butted against here. That is why I consider the Knight chassis one of the most ingenious designs. Then I decided to go, since I'm going with a clamp switch modification instead of the red buttons. If you want to go with the red buttons, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to be going with the clamp switches. The clamp switches, this was specifically designed from Dimitri Stock. He designed this for the Graflex 2.0. It also fits for the Graflex 2.5, and it is a very good design in general. I like it and I'm going to go with it. So I also have the momentary auxiliary switches inside that are going to fit nice and firmly. As you can see, I took one of these switches and it fit in beautifully. So that's that. These are the 3D printed plastics that I'm going to be going with. It is totally up to you, but if you're going to follow the build, that's okay. This is the kill key that will be butt it up against the chassis, the recharge port, and it will be twisting instead of coming out like the older kill key models. This is a better design because it only comes out when you have to charge the lightsaber. So you essentially twist it to cut power and bring power to the board when you need it to. I like this option, and since I already lost the kill key, I think that it's a necessity for me. Next, of course, since we're going to be going with a crystal reveal chamber, you're going to need a crystal. Now, there are a number of vendors on Amazon and eBay that sell quartz crystals. However, this crystal was not purchased by either. This used to be a necklace of mine that was given to me by my girlfriend on my name day. She got this for me, and it has it has a double meaning. Well, it is essentially a gift from her, which is special to me, and I had a feeling that one day this could power a lightsaber crystal. Because when I saw it at first, it looked to me like a kyber crystal that Jedi use in their lightsabers. So here it is today, fulfilling its destiny to power my crystal chamber for my Graflex lightsaber. Also, this comes from Namibia in Africa, which is the country where a lot of minerals and crystals come from. My family currently lives there, my parents and my sister meaning, so basically it ties the entirety together, family and future family. So this crystal has a purpose, it's not random, and I like the symbolism behind it. Essentially, I wish this crystal could illuminate on itself, but since I can't, at least for now, I'm going to be needing an LED accent diode. This one has been modified, if the camera will focus. This one, as you can see, has been modified. I kind of chopped a little bit of a plastic on it so that it could butt against my LED properly, so it can illuminate evenly. My LED crystal has also been modified from the necklace that it was, so that it can fit into my 3D printed chassis. When you're going to be doing the 3D printed chassis, you need to be very careful, because when your crystal protrudes from the second half of the chassis, there is a risk and a danger that when your soundboard module, when your speaker module, which is going to fit in this section particularly, I don't know if you can see it, but essentially when you butt these together and you put the chassis together and it comes mold together, you may want to be very, very cautious, because the crystal, if it's too long, it will butt against the speaker, specifically in the center of the speaker, which you do not want to mess with because it's going to ruin it. So make sure that your crystal is nice and trimmed down so that you can fit both crystals and the speaker in the soundboard. Sorry, in the chassis. Why am I saying soundboard? Okay, I'm just looking into this too much. And since I'm going to be using an LED diode, I am going to be needing a resistor so that I have a steady flow without risking the LED of burning out. This is a 10 pack, but I'm going to be needing only one of these resistors. This is a pack of 10 68 ohm quarter watt resistors. A friend of mine from a local store recommended these, and that's what I'm going to be going with. I don't want my crystal to be too dimmed, so that is why I went with such a resistance. However, you can go with much less ohms and much less watts, but I wanted to take precautions and do something right. So that's for the 3D printed plastics and the retention of your lightsaber electronics. Let us move on to the necessary materials and tools needed to make this lightsaber a reality. This is a shot of your workspace. You're going to need to put everything nice and tidy so that you know what you need when you need it. I have my soldering iron on this side because I'm a left-handed. I have my modified, hobby vise with its little table because I do not want to ruin my own table. I've clothed my dining table so that I do not lose any screws or small bits and parts, and also not to ruin the table because the missus will be furious. I have my Graflex kit that I'm going to be working on. I have a small cutting mat, but I'm really thinking of upgrading it to a larger mat so I can fit more things onto my workspace. I have 2 spools of soldering iron which I keep on the right hand side at any time. This is where I keep all of my snips and everything necessary that I'm going to be needing for the build. My battery test pack, my precision screwdrivers, my lamp that helps me see when I have very low visual on things. And here is my manual, the Nano Biscotti version 4. When you're going to be soldering this, it is essential, absolutely, to read and understand what it is you're working with. If you don't, it's not bad, but it's not good either. I suggest that when you're doing electronics, especially if you're doing it for the first time, it is essential to read and study what you're going to do. In here I have my Shapeways box where I have actually put in all of my TCSS or Custom Saber Shop electronic parts as well as my 3D printed chassis. So this again is the workspace. It is essential to be keeping it nice and clean so that you do not get mixed up. So moving on with our most important tools essential for this lightsaber build is your soldering iron. Your soldering iron is basically going to bring your lightsaber components together. I suggest an ESD safe soldering iron with a thermostat so that you can be safe in terms of heat and of course electrical discharges. Safety is of the utmost importance. If you have safety, you have quality and you have an awesome build. You're going to be needing some solder. Most preferably solder that is with a rosin core inside. Rosin core essentially means that flux is within the strand of the solder, so you won't be needing flux. Flux I don't have with me, but is essentially the paste that helps clean your soldering iron. Keeping the oxides away from the tip and ensuring that your solder joints are going to be sturdy, firm and clean so that you don't get cold joints. Next, you're going to be needing some desoldering braid. Now that is only in case you make a mistake. How does the soldering braid work? Well, you're going to be taking the solder braid here, or the wick, and you're going to be heating it up because it is copper, and copper does a great job. Well, it heats rather fast. So you take it on a joint that you consider that is wrong, or you screwed up, or you put too much solder and you want to remove it. Do not take the ESD safe iron and try to melt the solder all over from the beginning, because you might damage the rest of the components on it, whether it's wire or your soundboard, and you do not want that damaged. Simply just take the iron. It is not on right now, it is off. So simply just take your desoldering braid, heat it up, put it on the joint that you want to remove, and the desoldering braid will just essentially suck up the solder and you're good to go. You're going to be needing a soldering cleaning sponge because you're going to need to clean your sponge fairly regularly. Why that is because on the tip of your iron, every time you use some solder flux and when it burns, essentially you create oxides on the tip of your iron that will result and will bother you to do a proper job. Oxides result in cold joints and do not help your solder to flow properly on your build. Next, whenever you need to solder something, you're going to be needing some helping hands. They are essential because they're going to hold whatever you're soldering. When it's wire or your soundboard or anything, you use these two to hold down anything that you can't hold with your hands, and they're free so that you can use your solder and your soldering iron. They're steady, they're sturdy, and they're very reliable. Mine also has a magnifying glass, which I don't think I'm going to be using all that much, but that's basically it. Next on your build, you're going to be needing wire. I recommend 30 gauge wire, or at least the thickest that you can get away with is 28 gauge. 30 gauge wire is essential because it is so fine that it's going to fit in the very snug channels of your 3D printed chassis. And when all of your components and your electronics come together, it is essential that your wire is able to move around. Another thing essential, or well, not essential or mandatory, but it is always good to have, is a hobby vise. You can either have one that is a tabletop one or the one that practically clamps at the bottom of your table. If you have a dining table like I do right now, you do not want to risk ruining it, so I suggest that you make this little modification that I did. I sawed 3 pieces of wood and nailed them down to make a tabletop hobby vise that is going to help me clamp down the soundboard and the LED star that I want to hold in place if I need it to. So it's not mandatory, but it's always good to have around. I mentioned that we had 30 gauge wire, and wire needs to be stripped down off the sheathing so that soldering can be done properly. This one has all the way from 20 gauge wire, I don't know if you can see it, all the way to 30, which is what we're going to be using. The clamp is very sharp and it is usable basically to cut off any wire that you think that is excess. Be very careful because these are very sharp and you do not want to cut yourself. You're going to be needing to test some electronics, specifically your LED modules, to see if they light properly. I suggest picking up a battery pack from, any electronics store, and since you're going to be needing to test them, do not use the bare wires that they're going to come off with. And if they do have a JST connector, you're going to need to cut it off. So do not use bare wires. You should use some alligator clips that I have, which is here in this pack, which I got off a vendor from eBay. The alligator clips, specifically in Greece, that are toothless and made of copper, were very difficult and hard to find, so that's why I had to get them off eBay. But if you can find them where you are, it is essential. You should buy them for your battery test pack and for holding down your helping hands. If you do not want your teeth to damage the wire, which is recommended, you do not want to put your very thin 30 gauge wire in your helping hands, I suggest that you use your alligator clips, put them into your jaws of your bigger alligator clips, and essentially you do not run the risk of ruining your wire. So these are a must. I soldered and heat shrunk the connectors for the alligator clips, and I have a battery pack which I'm going to use in future videos to test the LEDs from the diode that I have from my crystal chamber, and of course from my LED heatsink module. Next we have some Allen keys, which are essential from, basically anything. Allen keys are always useful to have around when you're doing some modeling and building a lightsaber. For my American friends, I decided to go with American standard, their metric system, which is in inches. So we can be on the same page. For my European friends, I'm sorry, but you can buy these. There are metric and American standard, which are in inches. So I suggest that you go in the American standard so that we're all on the same page. Next is the precision screwdrivers, which are very essential and very important. Now, you can use these to help maneuver the wires within your chassis, so that you do not pinch them too much, because fingers are thick and the chassis is very, very small and petite, and these can be very helpful when you want to maneuver some wires or generally anything that cannot be done by finger. And I essentially got this kit specifically for this to help me unthread the Graflex pins. You're going to be needing some E6000 glue to hold down some things like your speaker and the chassis. E6000 is great for modelers kits or anything, and it is essential when you're doing a build like a lightsaber. You never know what you might need to glue down, and this is very powerful. However, if you do not have access to E6000, super glue or just modeling putties and pastes will do just fine, I promise. Heat shrink. It is essential when you're soldering stuff, especially wires. When you've just connected a wire to, anything, you might want to use some heat shrink because it's going to help protect the connection so that there are no discharges, so that there are no bare wires hanging out, and generally it makes for a very neat and tidy connection. I have an assortment of, well, sizes. I have the largest, which is 8 millimeters. I guess that is about, well, 2.5 inches. I'm not sure if my metrics are correct. And I have these 1 millimeter heat shrinks in different colors. And essentially, you're not going to need a whole lot. I don't have a kit, but if you do buy yourself a heat shrink kit, it is always a plus. But I only have what I'm going to be needing for this particular build. You're going to be needing some pliers as well. Now, this is generally useful to keep around unless something is too snug and you want to maneuver and take out when you need some force. I have these curve-shaped toothless pliers that are going to help me specifically with the brass pins because I do not have the necessary, well, I do have the other one from the Precision toolkit, the hex head, but it's not deep enough, so I'm going to need to modify that. Until that happens, this is going to be what I'm using. Next are the hobby snips, which are very great for getting into tight spaces. You're going to be needing some tape. Now, electrical tape is going to be essential for the battery connections and generally any wire that's hanging out. If you want to stay safe and not take any risks regarding safety, it's always good to take off some... Whoa! Someone's bringing down the thunder. Sorry about that. But essentially, electrical tape is good to have around when you've got some bare connections. I have some 3M double-sided tape. This is thin. But I'm not going to be using a whole lot of it, but you're going to be needing this for the build, specifically when it comes to the clamp. I'm going to be telling you where in general. Next is your metal accent rods, which is basically decorative. It is not mandatory, but I'm going to be using it for my build because I'm basically going to cut these, well, off screen, because I'm going to need the Dremel back at work and I do not possess a Dremel. I do really highly recommend that you have a Dremel on you at all times because it is essentially useful. I'm going to be making a specific video on where Dremels are going to be used, so don't worry. I'm going to, well, show you where you're going to need your Dremel and where it's going to be used. These accent rods are from this make, K and S. For my European friends, it is 2.89 millimeters. For my American friends, it is 0.114 inches. The code is 8167, so go and pick it up if you can get the chance to. You're going to be needing some rubbing alcohol to clean your hilt and anything metallic so that you can bond adhesives to it. So I suggest that you pick some well, regular isopropyl alcohol. Then you're going to be needing your modeler's paint for painting the chassis. I'm going to be going with silver and gold, and I'm going to be going over that in a specific video. You might need a marker pen. We don't know, you don't know, but it's always good to have one of these around in case you need to jot something down real quick. Always keep that next to you on your left or your right, depending on what kind of hand you use. Next, of course, you're going to be needing a PVC cutting mat. This is an A3 cutting mat, 45 by 30 well, millimeters. No, it's not millimeters, it's actually centimeters. So 45 by 30 centimeters. I don't know the inches, but the thing is that it's an A3 cutting mat and it is rather small. If you have something bigger, I suggest that you go with something bigger. And last but not least, the thermal paste that I mentioned earlier for the LED heatsink thermal insulation. It's not going to be used anywhere else, but I suggest that if you have these, keep them on and keep them around. If you can pick one of these up, I suggest that you do so. So essentially, these are all the tools and materials that are going to be used in this specific Lightsaber Graflex build. I will be seeing you in the next video where I'll be going over the build itself. Thank you for watching, and if you found this helpful, comment, like, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.